Hey guys, Jack, MJR, Mad Jack Racing. We already showed you a little bit of, checking in your bike, washing it, and kind of showed you the overall process, but I thought it was a good idea to kind of take a step-by-step into one of our check-in sheets so you can see exactly what goes on when your bike comes in the shop. So this is our good buddy Daryl's bike, and we are going to get it ready for the Colorado 1000 in a few weeks, new top end, and a couple other miscellaneous things. With that being said, first things first, bike number 28, that's our service number right here, so put that in there. Customer, Daryl Tarpey. We received it on 7/9, and we're going to expect to have it finished 7/19. That's basically a week from this Friday. Our goal is to give him a week or two to ride it before the big ride, so that way he can shake it down, make sure there's no issues. A couple important things we always record is the mileage. Every time we see a bike, we see this bike pretty often, so it's really important to record everything we do, when we do it, so that way we can look back and see, if something comes up with it, we can always reference back. So this one has 2,731 miles, and it has 128 accumulated runtime, so that's hours. Okay, now we always check and see if it has a skid plate. So yes, AXP. Tire brand, we always know he runs the X31 Bridgestone. Tire size, 80/121. Now tire pressure, this bike runs Moose's, as all of our bikes do, so there is no tire pressure, but one thing we will check is to see how it feels, if it's too soft. This one feels really good. Next thing that's going to come up on our list is checking the condition of the tire, and overall this tire is in pretty good shape. So come back up here, we're going to say good, leave. Go back to the rear now. It is a Bridgestone X40, and then we're going to go tire size is a 110/118. Moose again. Again, we're going to feel it. Tire condition. Although this tire is pretty worn, we're going to leave it for now. Let him ride with this one while he breaks the motor in, because we're doing a top end, and then before his big ride, we're going to go ahead and put tires on it. The next thing is wheel condition on the front. We spin it, make sure everything spins nice and smooth, freely, that the wheel's not completely out of true. And then ultimately what we're doing, I like to feel some spokes, make sure they're all nice and snug. And then I look for any scratches, cracks. Now this bike's pretty dirty, so we're gonna wash it and then take a look at it, everything again once we're done. But this is just the initial checkup. Wheel bearing condition is just the side-to-side play. You can basically hold the front brake and just pull it side to side. And as long as you don't feel any play, you should be good. And then another thing you can do, typically you could roll the wheel and you could either feel or hear the wheel bearings if they're pretty bad. So these ones are good. Wheel condition on the rear, same thing. We're just making sure everything spins smoothly, nothing's dragging. And then we're not too worried about the scratches or the dings on this one, at least until the bike is clean, then we can look at them better. Again, feel a bunch of the spokes. These ones do feel like a couple might be loose, so regardless, we're going to go through and do a stage 1 prep on this probably, so we're going to be torquing those anyway. But for now, we're going to say wheel's good. Wheel bearing condition is the same thing as the front. Check the side-to-side play, and this one feels nice and tight. So we're going to put that they're good. Brake rotor condition. So we're looking at a few things here. We're looking number 1 to make sure it's not bent, that the wheel spins nice and freely. You can also kind of keep an eye on the caliper as it's spinning, because these calipers, the way they're designed, they will move a little bit because they're floating. I look for all these grooves here and the ridges. This one's getting worn down pretty good. It's starting to get really rough, so most likely we're going to probably replace these sooner than later. It's got a really high spot up here, which is normal, but this one's getting pretty bad. Just like a car, if you replace the rotor, always replace the pads. But while I'm looking at the rotor, I'm going to look at the pads. Pads look good. Notate that. Brake rotor condition on the front is medium, could replace, so we'll talk to the customer about that. Pads are good. Brake operation, that's pretty much just how it feels. Make sure it's not too spongy. This one feels pretty good, although the customer does have a little bit of a complaint about it. It could be because of the rotor being so worn. Probably a new rotor will solve that. So brake feels pretty good. Brake rotor condition, we're going to go to the rear and check the same thing. And just look for any cracks. Make sure it's don't have any gnarly grooves where maybe something came loose and is rubbing on it. This one's getting worn pretty good. So customer doesn't have any issues with the rear brake, so we'll probably end up just leaving it, but definitely needs a rotor sooner than later. Brake pad condition is really just a visual. So we're just looking here at the thickness of them, make sure they're wearing evenly, not at some weird angle. You could always look at the caliper too to see if the caliper moves a little bit. That could be caused from a bent rotor, from one of these pins being slightly bent. Could be a few things, but everything looks good there. So brake operation, same thing as the front, we're just feeling it. Everything feels good. And we're also just visually looking real quick, making sure we don't have any wet spots where it could be leaking. So everything looks good. Our wire's intact. Got a little dirt in there, but that'll all get cleaned out. But ultimately, brake feels pretty good. So we're gonna say good on that one. Chain and sprocket condition. So we're gonna go back here. And we like to pull back on the chain right here and see, because no matter what, if you can pull back on this chain right here, that's because these rollers down the middle are getting pretty loose, and ultimately, eventually the chain needs to be replaced. So, you know, for this, I would say it's getting there. You could probably use a new chain. Of course, whenever we do a new chain, we want to do a front and rear sprocket, so that way everything wears together. If you put a new chain on these old sprockets, it's going to prematurely wear out the chain a lot quicker. So just something to notate. But this one's not bad. I would say, you know, medium, could replace. We'll check the front sprocket. The front sprocket's starting to get pretty U'd out, as you can tell right here. So we'll probably recommend replacing these chain and sprockets, especially because he's doing such a big ride. We always record what size. So this is a 1351, I believe. So we're gonna record that, so that way when we write up this quote, order parts, we know what we need. The chain and sprockets, we're gonna say medium, could replace. Chain type, 520 DoD. Sprocket size in the front is a 1351 in the rear. And then we're gonna look at the condition of the guide right here. So everything looks good. We've already upgraded this guy to the TM Designs chain guide and slider, so these should last pretty much the life of the bike. Slider may go a little bit quicker, but these are a lot better than stock. Chain slider is good. Now we're going to look at the fork condition. So this is kind of a two-part deal. So number one, most importantly, making sure that we don't have any leaks, which this one looks pretty good. We actually just serviced these not too long ago, so they should be good, and they feel nice and clean. They look clean. And then what we'll do is, once we go through the rest of this, we'll actually take the bike off the stand and feel how the forks feel and come back to this. But for right now, we're good. Shock condition, we're just gonna look at and make sure there's no leaks down here. So looks all clean, no signs of leaks at all. So we're gonna go ahead and notate that good. Again, once we go through the rest of this, we're gonna go ahead and take the bike off stand and see how the suspension actually feels. Linkage slash PDS if it was a KTM off-road bike, but for the linkage, we're just checking the up and down play right here. And basically I'm just pushing my two hands together, and there's a slight bit of play. You can put your hand here and kind of feel in the linkage or the shock and isolate where it's coming from. And this feels like it's the lower shock bushing, which is typical. This bike's got 130 hours on it. It's been ridden hard, so we're gonna say slight play, and we'll just let the customer know. Most likely for now, we'll leave it, and then, you know, maybe when this thing gets to 200 hours, we might decide to frame it out and, you know, replace the bearings then. Steering bearings, I'm gonna move this real quick just so we can feel them. We're just feeling the side to side, making sure nothing feels rough, nothing's notchy or catching. And then we also come up here and we're gonna pull just straight towards me and make sure we don't feel any play. Kind of like how the linkage, you know, you're feeling up and down, you're basically just pulling forward and back and making sure there's no play in the headset. Everything feels good side to side, so we're gonna say good and solid. Throttle system condition. So we're just coming over here, making sure it has the proper amount of free play from side to side. And then we're just gonna rotate a few times, make sure it feels smooth. This one feels good, it has a little bit of dirt in it maybe, but overall feels pretty good. No sticking, routing's all good, everything should be good there, so we're gonna say good and solid. Now clutch perch and operation. Now this isn't how the clutch works, this is just up here how the clutch feels at the hand, at the master cylinder. We visually look, make sure there's no leaks going on, and just kind of get an overall feel of the pressure and the free play, and everything feels good on this one. Check the routing. We know this bike pretty well, so we don't have to check too many things as far as routing, but if it's a bike that we don't know, a lot of times we'll look at the routing and suggest changing certain things depending on how they have it set up. This one's good and solid, so we'll move on now to handguard condition. This is really just for us to know. He runs the stock gas handguards. They're scratched up, normal wear. There's nothing falling off, nothing's breaking. We're just checking to, you know, cover ourselves and cover the customer. So those are good. Now we'll go down to the engine oil. So on this bike, it's a two-stroke, so it only has the transmission oil. So we're gonna go ahead and come right here and check it. Make sure it has enough. So on any 250, 300, the check bolt's always right here. And we're just gonna, I see oil coming out, and it looks pretty good actually. So we're gonna go ahead and put that back in. Most likely we're gonna check the clutch on this bike. And so if we decide that we need to replace the clutch plates internally, then at that point we're gonna, of course, put new transmission oil in it. Good level, good condition. Now we're gonna go up here to the coolant, check that. And we run engine ice, so we like it just above the fins, which is where that's at, so that's perfect. There's no real corrosion or anything going on inside the cap. Coolant is good. One thing I skipped, we always check the condition of the grips. These ones are getting pretty worn down, so because he's gonna ride this before his big ride, we'll probably just leave him for his initial break-in ride, and then right before his big trip, we'll put a fresh set on. So just make a note of that. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and take off the seat and check the battery voltage drop, and we're gonna get the bike started, make sure it's charging and all that. So we're gonna check the battery voltage real quick. This one's at 13.1, so we'll record that. Now voltage drop is basically what your voltage reads when you initially hit the starter button. So we're gonna make sure we have a good reading right here, and then we're gonna just tap the starter button. 10.8, 9.8. So basically anything, when that voltage drops anywhere below 10 volts, it's getting somewhat concerning. We would recommend to this customer, this is the original battery, so we'd probably recommend replacing it sooner than later, but it's not necessarily totally bad. So next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna go ahead and get this thing started. So now this is a TPI bike, so it's always important to start it with the little choke knob out and let this thing warm up very thoroughly. Prime the fuel pump. Now the last thing I'm going to check is just the charging voltage. We're just looking here, and we just want to make sure that that number is climbing somewhere above 13.5 volts. So this is perfect. So while the bike's on, we're gonna go ahead and check that the headlight's working, which it looks like it is. This only has one position, It's gonna die in a second because the bike died, but this only has one position, so it only works in the low position, so if you turn it to high, it's not gonna work. But while we're running the bike, we're just checking, making sure that the switches work, the lights, tail light, all that kind of stuff works. Typically, we'll turn on the Trail Tech here, make sure that that's charging and that there's no issues that we need to look into. And then essentially, I'll get the seat back on it. We've checked the whole bike. We've deemed that it's at least safe to ride. We know that it's got oil and coolant in it. And now what we're gonna do is gonna go take it for a test drive, and then we'll call the customer and go over the whole bike with them. Perfect. Now it's time to call the customer.